Historical fashion enthusiasts and Lolitas alike revel in taking a step back in history with our use of age-old garments, petticoats, corsets, lace. But few of us ever have our clothing to blame for our demise. Welcome to Curio of Glamour, a series where I discuss the history, science, and curiousness of fashion and beauty trends of yesteryear. This is a content warning that this video contains discussion of fires, death, and mass death by fires. Today we'll be discussing flammable fashion and the impact that it has on our modern world. Oscar Wilde was a controversial and flamboyant author from the 1800s. He is also one of my favorite authors. As I was deciding what to research for this video, I picked up my old copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray to reread, and the idea of flammable fashion came to my mind. Imagine my surprise when I learned that Oscar Wilde himself had a connection to this topic. Mary and Emily Wilde were the illegitimate daughters of Sir William Wilde and Oscar's half-sisters. It's unknown whether Oscar actually knew of these sisters, but their deaths made newspapers and is a story that's still talked about today. They met their untimely death at a Halloween ball. Mary is said to have been taking a final lap, dancing around the ballroom, when a candle grazed the edge of her dress, igniting her into flames instantly. Her sister Emily, in an attempt to save her, tried to extinguish the flames and caught on fire herself. Unfortunately, this is not a unique story from 19th century England. Much of the fabric of the clothing used in 19th century fashion was open weave. This means that the fabric contained a substantial amount of space between each thread and was especially popular for performance purposes as it creates a delicate, cascading, and undeniably beautiful appearance. The fabrics that were commonly used in this time were bobinette, gauze, tarlatan, and infamously crinoline. Dresses, petticoats, and bloomers were wrapped in layers of this fabric. You may be wondering how this makes for a deadly combination. Let's do a quick course on combustion, the process by which things catch fire. When fuel is heated to the point of releasing gas, the resulting chemical reaction is combustion. Combustion requires three key elements, which is often referred to as the fire triangle: heat, fuel, and oxygen. You need ample amounts of all three elements in order for a fire to start, and unfortunately, these gowns form a perfect triangle. First, you need oxygen. Due to the breezy, lightweight construction of these open weave fabrics, igniting a fire is made significantly easier. As opposed to the wools that were typically used in menswear, the ample room between stitching gives a tiny fire plenty of O2 to make for disaster. Second is fuel. If you've ever tried to start a fire, you know how important it is to have a variety of materials for your fire to spread toward. Given the heavy emphasis on layers, this made for an ideal environment for flames. And finally, we arrive to heat. The 1800s lacked what we take for granted now: electricity. Gas-lit lanterns and candles were a dime a dozen, providing a plethora of ways for dresses to end up in flames. Additionally, the cone shape of the 19th century gowns provided a direction and a cone for the fire to become trapped, which further complicated efforts to put out flames when women's dresses caught on fire. In fact, fires were extremely common during this time period as a whole. The advent of electricity, as well as stricter fire mandates and safety measures, made leaps and bounds for England's fire problem. It is said that there were nearly 3,000 deaths within 1 year where fires were to blame. Although there were coatings that could make these fabrics flame retardant at the time, they caused a yellowing, which many women found unflattering and ugly. So many women opted into having the non-flame resistant version of their garments. Women from all over the country and all over the world would meet their untimely demises through flames. Ballet dancers were especially affected. Theaters lined with gas lamps proved to be especially hazardous, as the ballerinas would jump and dance and twirl across the stage, causing even more of a fire hazard. Claire Webster was a ballerina who caught fire during a performance and died 2 days later of her injury. Emma Livery was another ballerina who met her demise through flames. She was up and coming and caught fire during a performance, dying sadly of her injuries 8 months later. The problem wasn't just happening in England either. The Church of the Company fire in Chile was deadly and horrifying, resulting in the estimated deaths of between 2,000 and 3,000 people. This fire was said to be exacerbated not only by the large amount of tapestries hanging on the walls of the church, but also the garments of the women who were inside the church as well. When I was doing the research for this video, I wanted to highlight more of the victims of these fiery tragedies. However, there are countless people who died this way. Another interesting fact I learned while researching this video is that although the cone shape of the dresses proved to be absolutely devastating when it came to catching on fire, that cone shape was actually extremely helpful for women who found themselves in watery situations. And the buoyancy of the dress saved many women from drowning at this time. Although horrifying and tragic, the prevalence of women who experienced burns as a result of their dresses catching on fire inspired the physician from America, Thomas Mutter, to invent the Mutter flap, which is a surgical procedure that is still used to this day. London's problem with fires was well documented and well researched, and it's definitely something you should look into if you're interested. However, it cannot be understated the major impact that electricity made in preventing these fires and making it safer for people to exist. Although not all fabrics are flame retardant now, there are a good amount of them that are covered in flame retardant coating or made from flame retardant materials so that situations like this don't happen anymore. Another huge aspect is that we use a lot less layers in our clothing now as they did back then. So if you do catch on fire, you don't need to make sure you take off 10 layers of clothing to escape. I definitely knew that there were a lot of problems with fires because I am a big fan of classic literature, and there are a ton of fires featured in stories that was used as a big plot device, but I guess I didn't realize how much of a common issue it was. The fact that 3,000 people died in England in 1 year is so devastating and sad to me. Another thing that I stumbled upon while doing the research for this video is the Great London Fire. So it seems like fires were a really big deal, and I'm really thankful that we don't seem to have the same problems now as we did back then. If you know any stories about flammable fashion or have any ideas for future videos you want to see from Curio of Glamour, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching this video and hanging around with me while I talk about some really sad stuff. If you want a light-hearted video next week, keep your eyes peeled for Chantel's baking and bows. I think she's going to be making banana bread, but don't quote me on that. Also, make sure you follow Rosé Forêt on Instagram at Rosé Forêt Co. or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/roseforêt for any updates about what we're doing as a group, for our YouTube, as well as our upcoming event in September, Virtual Versailles. And we appreciate having you here so much. So thank you for watching. Bye.